All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 8th of February, 2023, and this is the Cluster API Community Project meeting. Cluster API is a sub-project of SIG Cluster Lifecycle in the Kubernetes world. And so as such, we adhere to the Kubernetes SIG's code of conduct, which basically means if you'd like to talk, please raise your hand. And in general, please be kind to each other. So let's get moving here. I was gonna try to open the chat so I could see it, but I'm having some difficulties finding it. There we go. All right, cool. All righty. So at the beginning of our meetings, we like to welcome new attendees or new members of the Cluster API community. So I will mute myself for a second here. And if you would like to, please raise your hand or just unmute yourself and introduce yourself. All right, I am not seeing anyone unmuting or hands raising, so I'm going to guess that everyone has either introduced themselves or maybe we'll do so another time. So let's move on to our open proposal rezones. I don't know, do we have any open proposals at the moment? Looks like not. Is there anyone who'd like to talk about the stale proposals or open documents that we have? All right, yeah, David, please. Oh, David dropped his hand. Fabrizio, please.
Yeah, I think that, we can give an update on how is going the work for we are implementing two main proposals about not label and not propagation. Yuvaraj and Stefan are leading the work. So we are making progress. We have a bunch of PR out. We are trying to drive them to a state where we can ask for feedback for a wider audience. But yeah, I think that we are still in line to get this completed, all the work about not label, not propagation, to get it completed by the end of the release. And as well, we made two amendments to existing proposal. One is KCP remediation, PR out near the end.
Am I looking at the right doc here?
No, this is those are proposals that were already merged, so they are not anymore there in the document. So yeah, work for KCP remediation in line for the release. We, as well as the work for supporting variable discovery for cluster class. Yeah, so things are proceeding. If someone is interested to those efforts that we discussed in the past, please reach out to the team. I don't know if Stefan or other folks want to add something. Oh, we also merged the work, something about the autoscaler usage in cluster class.
I think you probably said it all. So we're working on the propagation. The node label part is already merged, but we're working mainly on machine deployment to machine, set to machine propagation, and KCP to the machine. I mean, mostly Yuvaraj actually, and Killian on the variable discovery part, which is like half implemented roughly. We hope we have something close to final the next 1 or 2 weeks for variable discovery. And what Fabrice mentioned at the end, we merged a PR which extends the defaulting of the machine deployment replica field to make it easier to use it together with the autoscaler. I think I brought it up 1 or 2 weeks ago, so there should be a link like 1 or 2 meeting notes down. Yeah. I think nothing else to add.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Stefan and Fabrizio. I guess I don't know if it's worth putting links to that stuff in here afterwards, but you know, thanks for mentioning it.
I can add some links to the like higher level issues.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So we'll go now to our discussion topics, and it looks like Sagar and Jacob have the first one up. Are you folks around?
Sure, I can get started. So the repo that I've added here is the in-cluster IPAM provider that we have built, which we use in the CAPI land to basically leverage IPAM for node IP addresses. So currently, this particular repo lives in the Deutsche Telekom GitHub organization. Considering that this is something that, or this project is something that is very closely related to the Cluster API family of projects, I was hoping that maybe we could find a better organization for this repo to live in. I'm not sure what folks have in mind. Is there any suggestions, or are there any suggestions about like what this or where this repo should be living? My thought was that maybe we could move this under the Kubernetes SIGs, or sorry, the same organization that all of the CAP provider repos live in, just because I think like since the last 1.3 release, we probably have like a different sort of, or we have introduced IPAM as a different sort of provider when using cluster CTL. So probably it makes sense for this repo to live under that organization. Just curious about thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Sagar, and I see Fabrizio is raising his hand. So please, Fabrizio.
So I think that there are a couple of considerations. So when you bring a provider inside the community, you decide to abide to the community, and so I think the ambition is that to having many companies to contribute with the same provider and making it grow. I know that it does not always happen, but I think that should be the ambition for people that moves. It also comes with you have also to accept how things are done, are not only the community code of conduct, etc., but you have also to accept to work with all the tooling that the community offers, like PRAO or whatever. So technically, let me say, if I think at this from a cluster, from a SIG cluster cycle tech lead, I think this is a good idea. It will be the showcase of implementation of IPAM provider, and it is a good idea to have under the SIG umbrella. But yeah, this is something that if you are interested to do it, you have to come to the SIG cluster Lifecycle meeting and basically make the case to open it, because the SIG lead has to +1 the request. I have also another consideration, which is final. So I don't have a strong opinion. Sometimes it's a good idea, sometimes not. But if you look at this from the operational cost to handle a repository, cut version, look at end-to-end test, etc. So the maintenance of a new project is quite high. So depending on how big is the community, how do you want to manage this, I think that it could be also an option to figure it out if to host this together with some other project. It could be CAPV, it could be CAPI as well. But managing a repository, monitoring end-to-end test, signal, all the automation, make files, it is a lot of work. So depending on how much traction there is on this provider, maybe that it is too much to take in. So yeah, those are the kind to, from one side, a repository is nice to have, give visibility, etc., etc. From the other side, it is also work.
So from what I'm hearing, you're suggesting that there is, or that could be a potential other option wherein we could fold this repository under maybe say CAPI, or like for that matter CAPI as well, and that could be one thing that we could probably look at as well.
I didn't quite understand that, Cigar. Are you saying like try to merge this into CAPI itself?
So I think that that's what Fabrizio mentioned, that could probably also be like one solution or one option that we could look at eventually. I'm not suggesting like we go with the other option, but just something probably that Jacob and I can think about and probably come up with some sort of list of like what each approach brings to the table.
Yes, I think also hosting in CAPI could be an option. Maybe it is because in CAPI we already have 3 or 4 sub provider into it, but yeah, let me say, it is just, I think that first of all, as a maintainer of this process, and then I let Jacopo to speak, you have to think, okay, how much strength, how much people we have to maintain a separate repository, can we do it, etc., etc. And then according to this, we can steer the discussion in the SIG cluster lifecycle meeting.
Jakob, did you still have a
Yes.
comment?
Yeah, just wanted to add a bit. So the idea of adding it to some other repo, I would then propose to, I mean, for me, it only makes sense to do it in the CAPI repo itself, because it's not really strictly, or it's related to CAPV, yeah, but it's also intended to be used by other infrastructure providers, and hiding it in quotation marks in the CAPV repo might not be ideal. From our perspective, or from Telecom perspective, it's also not about visibility. I think I also proposed it in the initial, or during the proposal of the IPAM contract in general, to just move this once it's ready to cluster to Kubernetes 6 or maybe somewhere else. But also because VMware is currently contributing so much that they are, I think it doesn't take long until they overtake me, because I just don't have the resources right now. It's also not really fair to have it live at the Telecom repository. And as the third point, the initial intention for it was to serve as a reference implementation. We're actually not using it, and we don't need it. It's just to have something for providers to test with, and something as like a very basic implementation to have for a IPAM provider. We're actually building another provider that integrates with Infoblox, a external IP address management tool. So yeah, it's also not, it's not very big. So it's like code-wise, it's not that complex. It's 2 custom resources, just one global and one namespace one, but both do the same thing. And then it's, I don't know how much, but a few hundred lines of code that just manage an IP address pool in using in cluster resources. It's not very complex. So it might be small enough to still add to the main CAPI repository, even though there's already a lot of providers in there.
So if I'm hearing this right, it sounds like kind of the next steps out of here would be maybe Cigar, take a look at kind of documenting the various options, and then figuring out, like, just kind of putting it into a documentation. And then next step would be going to the SIG cluster lifecycle meeting and kind of having the discussion there about, like, should it be a repo of its own, or maybe could we just add it to one of the other cluster API repos? Stefan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to bring up one point for core copy. Just in case you want to move it in core copy, we definitely need a difference, or let's say a dedicated set of maintainers for it, if you put it there. Because I think looking at the current code, looking at the current maintainers, looking at who's doing which reviews, we are really at a limit or already over it. So well, it's definitely probably a separate discussion is like, does it fit into the repo or not? We definitely need separate or dedicated maintainers for that, because we just can't take on that work on top of what we already do today. Because I think that's one problem of the core repo. We kind of put more and more stuff into it, but we're not necessarily getting more reviewers or maintainers for all that stuff. And today it's super hard to understand and review and maintain everything that we have in there. But that doesn't mean I'm like against putting it in there. I'm just saying if we decide to do it, we really need dedicated maintainers, right?
All right, cool. Furcat, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, hey folks, since you are here, I just wanted to bring up that as a CapM3 provider, we are also interested on this. And we had discussions with Jacob. Since we have our CapM3 specific IPAM solution, but we are really interested to integrate into the CAPI provided IPAM, let's say. So we would be happy to contribute and even be in the list of reviewers there.
Cool, thank you.
I think we'll just consider the options. One thing also to think about is release management, because I think if you have one repository hosting multiple things, it's hard to do individual releases. Like with the CAPI repository, it's not really a problem because most of the things are so tightly interlinked that it doesn't really matter. But maybe for the IPAM provider, you don't need releases as frequently, or also it would maybe be good to have them decoupled from CAPI itself, because right now CAPI hosts, well, the core and the bootstrap stuff for kubeadmin and some testing, or the Docker provider, basically. I think that's all. Having tight relationships with versions there is probably okay, but for other things, like, for example, that IPAM provider, it might not be ideal in some cases.
Yeah, good points. All right, so it sounds like maybe we need to have a little further discussion about this in terms of once we identify the options, then figure out what makes the most sense. There's a lot of variables to keep in mind here. Does anyone else have comments on this, or should we move to the next topic? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up, so let's move on to the next one. Hiromu has some use cases for revision history annotation. So please, Hiromu.
Oh, yes. Thank you. My comment is basically the discussion for the comment that Fabrizio gave me at this PR. Yeah, I think he gave me the comment that maybe we have the choices for using version history for rolling back strategy. But which means currently the rollback and the comment, it's just for the rolling back for the sorry, they're just using the latest revision number, but maybe we can extend that feature to revision history, which means we can rolling back to any versions included in revision history annotation, which is not implemented in the current code. So I think this can be the discussion topic for community. Maybe there is a use cases for doing that.
I guess, Fabrizio, since it was your comment, did you have any response to that?
Yeah, so when I was reviewing this PR, basically in parallel, we are doing the work on the label propagation. And so we kind of figured it out that revision history is still a feature used in Cluster API. And it basically, just to give a little bit of context, so whenever you change a machine deployment, a new revision is created. But if you change to one of the previous state of the machine deployment, basically an old machine set is used, it is just upgraded the revision number, revision history. So instead of creating new machine set, it kind of reduce on an old machine set and then and keep track of this machine set being in two position of the revision histories using a revision history field. So it's kind of complicated, but it is there. So when I was reviewing this PR, basically my comment was, oh, in this PR, which is showing the revision history, we have to keep into account also this field, because otherwise we are basically giving a revision with some holds. So it is not the correct history as Cluster API manages. Okay, then there was this comment, maybe it is a good time for the discussion. I'm not against it, but discussing deprecating a feature or a field in the API or a behavior is a longer discussion. So my point is, maybe it is better to just implement it now and then separate eventually after, open the table, do we really need this feature or not? That's my only comment. So if we want to get this moving fast, we basically have to make this feature work with what is there.
Right. I have to admit, I'm a little confused by by exactly what's going on here, but it sounds like the revision history is a field that we keep, and you're saying you can pull revision numbers out, and then if you try to reset to that revision number, it doesn't actually pull that old record. It just sets everything to the way that revision was at that number, but at the current record, I guess. And I see Yuvraj has his hand up. Maybe he has a good explanation for this.
Yeah, it is probably easy to show with an example, but it takes a little bit time to get the use case ready. So maybe we can work on it.
Yuvraj, you're muted as far as I can tell. I mean, not muted in Zoom, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, and Yuvraj, I see you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I can briefly explain, briefly answer what Mike's question is, and also then expand on the comment there. So imagine this case where we have machine set 1 and machine set 2, and machine set 2 is the current machine set, and machine set 1 was just something we came from, right? If the user now rolls back to machine set 1, what would happen is machine set 1's revision number will be changed to 3, and in the revision history annotation, we will store 1. So it's basically like machine set 1 is revision 3, but it also used to be revision 1. That's the idea, right? Now coming to this particular PR and the comment here, I believe the idea behind this PR is to be able to list all the revisions that a user can roll back to, right? And right now, if you have a machine set that has revision number 3 and revision history as 1, you can only, when you are rolling back, you can specify
roll back to revision 3, but you cannot specify rollback to revision 1, even though they are basically the same machine set, right? It's just how our cluster cuddle command is written. So since that is the case, the idea was to only list down the revisions that you can actually provide as an argument when you're trying to roll back, but maybe also add a column or some other way of representing, yeah, this you can roll back to revision 3, which is also technically revision 1, right? So have a list of, have a row, have individual row items for the revision numbers that you can actually roll back to, but maybe have like an additional column in the table that also says like duplicate revision or matching revisions or whatever, and then list down all the numbers that you find in your revision history annotation. That's the brief summary of my comment, and I hope that helps.
That helps. Thank you, Yuvraj. Did you have another point you wanted to make, or should we move on to Stefan? Okay,
No, that's all, yeah.
Stefan, you're up next.
Okay, so just did I understand correctly, Yuvraj? So essentially you're saying the cluster cuddle rollout command currently only supports to roll out to the revisions which actually are stored in the revision annotation. It just doesn't look at the revision history annotation. And because of the current limitation of the rollout command, we should also write a history command so that it actually just fits together and we don't show stuff that the rollout command can't roll back to. But what we could also do is we could write a history command that it shows all revisions and also adjust the rollout command that it can also deal with revisions which are only stored as history. It should be relatively easy because if you're looking over the machine sets, we just have to look at both annotations and then say, oh yeah, I don't know. I don't care if you roll back to 1 or 3. It's just the same thing. Also, let's do the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would work. Yes.
Okay. So I guess the question here is, oh, I see Fabrizio, you've got your hand up, please.
I was basically saying what Stefan is saying. So if today rollback is not considering this, is more a bug than a feature. So we should get a revision history to work well, possibly to solve this complexity for the user, just so a plain sequence without 3 was 1, let's just show 1, 2, 3, and let's user pick 1, and then basically do the rollback, applying the spec of the machine set back to machine deployment. So in other words, it is complex, it is implemented complex, I agree, but we are giving, when we implement cluster cuddle command, we should make it simple for the user.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Hiromu, please.
Maybe I don't get the point. I don't want to make this discussion specific for this peer. I didn't intend it that originally, but I think using revision history in actual logic is a little bit complex. So maybe I felt it's not a good idea to use that in as a rollback strategy. So I think we have to confirm the use cases first. Is that in line with your thought?
Yeah, Fabrizio.
If I look at the feature, so what I do expect is that as a user, I change the machine deployment. This change gets tracked into a revision history. Let's forget about this is implemented. So for a certain number of change, which is my revision history number, they get tracked, and I should be able to to go back and forth from all of them. Okay.
Mm.
Looking at this part of code, and this is the end user goal. So if I look at this part of code, there are a couple of bugs that we figure it out. For instance, if you change some field like what is one mutable field, Yuvaraj? Help me, my memory is
Min ready
blanking out.
seconds.
Exactly. If you change min ready second, today is not tracked in the revision history, which is bad. Okay. Or if you say revision number 8 and you start using revision history like we were discussing, Yuvaraj explained before, you can actually store more than 8 versions. So there are a couple of bugs, but in the implementation. But if I look from the user perspective, really the requirement is simple. Every time I do a change, I want a revision. I want to be able to roll back. So we can discuss as to make the implementation better, but I think that the goal is pretty clear. So dropping revision history, because it's complex, it goes, in my opinion, in a wrong direction, because we are not reaching the goal to allow the user to go back in history. So we can find a better solution, that I agree. We can fix the bug that are in this feature that we are still learning, because it is the first time that we dig into this part of the code. But I think that the original goal of the feature is to allow to roll back. Then it is up to us to find a good implementation to solve the problem. I don't know if it makes sense as a solution. As a comment.
Stefan, please.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree. Essentially, if you would ignore revision history, it would mean that we get arbitrary holes in our history, just depending on if certain machine sets look the same as some other previous machine sets, and that would be pretty awkward for users. So I think that's essentially a use case to present like a history which makes sense and don't get like arbitrary holes in the middle just because of the way that machine deployment controller is tracking the history. And I think it's comparatively easy to deal with the annotation in Classical. It's way harder to keep that stuff working in the machine deployment controller. If you're concerned about the things you have to do in Classical specifically, I think we can follow up on the PR and just give some hints. I mean, I don't know the Classical code, to be honest, but what I know based on the annotations and how Classical probably works, I think it shouldn't be too complicated to handle revision history on top of handling revisions. So we can give very specific hints on how we think that what has to be changed to handle that as well. That helps.
So what I'm hearing here is kind of we have an idea of what the goal is, what we want the user to be able to do, but the implementation is kind of complicated. And right now, that's what we need to do, is we kind of need to focus on the PR and kind of work out the details there. So I'm trusting Stefan and Fabrizio and Hiromu. You all will continue to follow, and Yuvaraj, you all will continue to follow up on the PR then. Does that help, Hiromu?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. If there's no other comments on that, Hiromu, you've got the next one with the upgrading strategy.
Yes, this is basically just the questions of the current implementation. I think this is about also rollback, and I think the current code only supports the situation that we upgrade workload class, worker nodes. So is there any strategies for upgrading control plane node, or maybe we have to expand the scope to management cluster itself? That was the first question, and the second one I talked later.
Okay, so I guess does anyone have an answer for the update strategies, I guess, for the control plane nodes? Fabrizio.
Yeah, I can try to answer if no one else wants. So I'm trying to understand the question, but I think that when it comes to control plane, point number one is that there are different control plane implementations. So there are different control plane providers, and each one can decide how to implement this. If we talk about the Kubernetes control plane provider, Kubernetes control plane provider has been designed to always prefer stability over speed. And so basically what it does is that when it has to upgrade, it just delayed, it upgrade nodes in a sequential order, one at a time. So we have three, it starts from the first one, delete, recreate within a new version. If everything works, move to the second one, delete, recreate a new version. If everything works, move to the next one. So at every operation, it does one operation at a time and always check that everything is fine before moving on. Prefer stability over speed. If the please go on.
Oh, already. So I meant rollback rollout command. I mean, if we use, sorry, I think I have to describe that. If we use rollout undo command or anything else, the things we can control is just the worker nodes, I think. So there is no tools to control the rollout of control plane nodes. So that was my question.
So you're asking about triggering a rollout in the control plane?
Yes.
Now, Yuvaraj, please help me. If I remember well, there is a rollout after in the control plane that can be used. And so, because yes, the control, the difference between control plane and machine deployment is that, for instance, control plane does not have any notion of history, but it has a field which is a rollout after. If you set a rollout after to something in the past, it will immediately start a rollout. And this is a way to do so. I don't remember if it is already implemented in Cluster Couple or not, honestly.
Okay. I asked that. Sorry, maybe I asked that because once you mentioned that the current rollout command is incomplete, and that there is a limitation that when there is a limitation for when we use it for downgrading the Kubernetes version or something like that. And I want to make that clear. What is the limitation for the current rollout command? And I guess maybe this is the one of the limitation you mentioned. I don't remember it.
I think this is another topic. So let me say, we go back. Each control plane provider is different than others. But what is the issue here is that, for instance, if you use Kubernetes and you try to roll back a control plane to a previous Kubernetes version, Kubernetes does not support a downgrade. So there is the risk that rolling back, so now we're talking about rolling back and not rollout. Rollout will mean just rotate the machines. Rolling back will be, oh, we are at this version of the control plane. We want to go back to the previous version. Okay, there are a couple of problems. First of all, is that if you look at KCP, there is no shared notion of history. KCP does not track history like you do in machine deployment with machine sets. You don't have the previous version of KCP are not stored anywhere. Problem number one. Problem number two is that it is the control plane. We have to be careful. And so even if we think about a mechanism to keep track of the version of the object and to roll back, we have to make this mechanism bulletproof. That means that, for instance, for Kubernetes control plane, we cannot roll back to a previous version if the previous version imply rolling back the Kubernetes version, because this is not supported by Kubernetes, it will break. So there are a couple, we can think about this, but it is not a simple problem. We have to track history and make sure that when we roll back, we do not break the control plane. This was the goal of my comment. Sorry if it wasn't clear.
Yeah. I understand your point, and that was all about the control plane. So regarding current rolling back comment, and the command or something like that, that is the out of scope, right? So what I try to say is the issue regarding the rollout command. How can we close that? And if we focusing on the worker nodes, I think the current implementation is almost complete. But if we want to consider about the rollback for the control plane, we have to continuously work. So I want to hear the actual meaning for the opinion from you that current rollout command is incomplete.
Honestly, I don't have a formal opinion. This effort was driven by another contributor, and it was an issue. There was not a design proposal that we agreed upon. So if you want, I can take a look and follow up on the issue, make up my mind and try to follow up. But yeah, okay. Given that there was not a design, it was something that we were implementing, that basically a contributor was leading, and we were reviewing it step by step like we're doing now.
Okay. So I think it's better to discuss on that issue. So for now, it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the questions, Hiromu. It sounds like a difficult one to kind of get to the bottom of. But yeah, hopefully I don't know what issue we're talking about. Do you have a link to it that we can add here? And then I don't know, is there any more discussion on this topic, or should we move to the next one?
I think that if it's okay, I want to talk about the second question.
Yeah, please.
This is also about upgrading strategies. I can see the difference between the strategies for upgrading Kubernetes version between the CAPD and the other provider. I just tried CAPO, but when we use CAPD, we can, if we want to upgrade the Kubernetes version, what we have to do is just changing the Kubernetes version field. But in CAPO, we have to make an image for that version, and the changing the images field in the machine deployment. with those, and it is completely different. And in the CPO, it is completely. I think the version field is it doesn't work actually. It just is like an annotation. It's meaning nothing. So so I think CAPI have to show their maybe clear policy for using that version field for the ease of for the usability. So I'd like to hear the community's opinion about that topic.
So I do want to note that we're getting down to the last 10 minutes of the meeting and we still have a few topics here. I appreciate this is a really complicated topic, Hiromu. I think we need to keep the discussion going on this issue if we can. Or is there another issue maybe that you would want to open, or is that the proper one to continue the discussion?
Sorry, do you mean I have to open an issue?
No, I meant to follow up on these questions about the rollout. You know, you're asking some deeper questions about the rollout mechanics here. And I'm just wondering, is this issue, the 3439, is this the best place to continue the discussion about your questions? Because I want to make sure that we as a community can answer your questions, but it sounds like with the time we have left in this meeting,
okay.
I'm not sure we'll be able to answer them. So I want to make sure that the discussion continues.
Yeah. I think so. I think this issue works for this topic.
Okay, great. Then I would say like maybe add your follow-up questions to the issue, and then we can continue the discussion there.
Okay.
Thanks. And you've got the next topic too, about I can never remember these names, CAAPH topic. So please go ahead.
Yes, but this is for the CAPH, not a copy. So I can't find any good places to add that topic for CAPH. But I heard that the meeting is you held together with the CAPI, so I just put the topic for CAPH.
I'm trying to. What is the CAAPH? I don't remember that acronym.
It is the provider for Elm, but today Microsoft folks are not here because they have a overlapping meeting internal. So I think that we have to postpone next week with Jonathan is around.
Okay, so maybe ask this question again next week, Hiromu, when the Microsoft folks are around, or maybe ping them in the CAPI channel as well.
Okay.
All right, so we got a couple minutes left here for some provider updates, and it looks like Richard, you've got both of them, so please take it away.
Richard asked me to take over because there's some
cool. Well, Stefan,
noise issues.
Please take it away.
Yeah, so essentially, Richard asked me to just bring it up that there are LFX Spring mentorships open until 14 February. One for AWS, one for GCP. That one obviously about managing prereqs in cluster AWS ADM, and that one about supportability of CAPG, tracing, and pprof. Yep. So applications open until 14 February, and then it starts on 1st March for 3 months. If you know anyone who wants to apply, or if you have any channels to multiply, feel free to tell everyone. Yeah, I think that covers it.
Yeah, thanks to both you and Richard for bringing this up. Yeah, so anybody who is here or maybe watching a recording later, there are some mentorships starting up, and these two issues here, I think, are where you can go to find the information and ask questions, or I'm not sure, would they do the application through here, or I guess does they have more information there if someone wants to follow up?
I guess that maybe that link, can you click on open for applications? There's a link there.
Oh, yeah, great. I
Yeah,
just
that's
need to
probably
open
what I
my eyes a little more. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So, and if you're looking to apply, the links are in our agenda. So that's awesome.
Yeah, but I think it's totally fine probably to contact Carlos or Richard if there are more questions somewhere in Slack.
Yeah. So please reach out either on the issues or in Slack to get in touch with Carlos or Richard about this. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the meeting, or the end of the agenda, I should say. Are there any other last minute topics or questions that people have before we wrap up here? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up. So 3, 2, 1. All right, thanks everyone. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for hosting. All right.
Thank you.